Once you have the blocks down and you know what the names of the blocks are, it makes it a little bit easier to start learning what the different shots are. I like to break the shots down into categories of blows, depending on the physics of the shot. The most basic way to swing a sword that most people are used to, if you've never been taught how to swing a sword, you're going to swing in a cutting motion. A cutting motion is much like if you were pounding a nail in with a hammer. Your elbow, your hand, your pommel, your sword tip are all moving in the same direction. Your sword tip is just moving faster than the rest. You may keep a fist grip the whole time you do it, or not, but the characteristic of it is that the hand is leading and the sword tip is going in the same direction. When I try to explain that to people, I try to do it by showing them a hammer stroke, which is this, which is literally like I'm pounding a nail. That's a cutting motion. You can cut left, you can cut right, you can cut all kinds of different ways. Some people's entire style is based on cuts. I think the first big advancement away from that in the SCA was the snap. Instead of my hand moving in the same direction as my sword tip, my hand is moving directly along the line of attack towards my target, and then the sword tip is going to flip out at the end, so it looks a bit like this. And it's a totally different mechanic. Once again, I have a cut, I have a snap. Most shots are going to have a certain amount of cut and snap in them at the same time. It's going to look something like that. Okay? The snap is totally relying on timing. If you punch out, pause, and then try to use your wrist to throw the blow, it's going to be weak every time. In order to have power, you have to have timing between the shoulder, arm, wrist, all has to work together at the right motion. And the best way to learn that is by practicing a flat snap and by doing it on a pel and hitting it hard. If you watch me do the flat snap front on, the way I was originally taught to do it was with the hand here, and I still think, even though we don't throw that way usually, it's a good training method to sort of learn the timing. I'm going to start out with my pommel facing my opponent like I'm trying to hide my blade so you can't tell how long it is. Facing directly towards your eye. I'm going to punch out towards my opponent's eye, using my shoulder and whatever else I need, whatever other mechanics I want to use to get as much force into that as possible. About halfway through that, I'm going to start letting the sword tip come out. My hand's actually going to start slowing down, and then the sword is going to reach a final position with my hand in an OK grip, with my sword arm in a complete straight line. Now, in order to learn the timing of this, it's very important that I don't allow my hand to come across my body, that I only allow my hand to go forward and backwards. If I allow my hand to come slightly across my body in a cutting motion, then I can generate power very easily with that cross motion. If I'm able to generate power on the pel, not using that cross motion, only with my hand moving perfectly forward and backwards, okay, then that means I've learned the timing. I'm going to cut the pel. Here's a cut. You cut the pel. Watch, my hand is going to move across my body as I hit, okay? I'll throw a cut. Now I'm going to do the same thing with a snap. Now my hand's going to move in a straight line. I'm going to punch forward. And most of the power comes from the beginning of the technique. I'm generating the momentum at the beginning by accelerating the sword forward. I'm not really adding any overall energy to it after that. All I'm doing is slowing down and shifting that energy out to the tip of the sword. It sounds kind of metaphysical, but when you get the taming down, when you actually practice it, it works. And it looks something like this. Okay? Now, the reason we call this a flat snap is because it's parallel to the ground. It's flat. It's at least flat in this plane. It may not be flat in this plane. Some people will angle the plane down slightly and still call that a flat snap, and it'll look like this. Okay? Okay? But I'm not going to do that for now because I want to just get the strongest snap as I can, a straight line. Now, one of the differences between a snap and a cut, people will talk about the sweet spot on the sword. What part of the sword hits the hardest? If they primarily cut, the sweet spot's probably going to be right around here somewhere, maybe 60 to 75% of the way down the blade. It's not going to be down here. If they hit down here, it's going to feel tippy because the energy of the sword is not going to be transferred well into the blow. The tip is going to hit and the sword's going to continue, and there's very little energy in the tip because the tip's not moving that fast. There's a lot of energy down here. This mass is moving, and I can't adequately transfer that energy into my target. So if I hit near the end, it's going to feel really weak. If I hit lower down, it's going to feel stronger. With a snap, that's not true. With a snap, the sweet spot's going to be probably about 3 inches from the end. If I hit lower than that, I'm hitting with a slower moving part of the sword, and since I don't have that big mass to add to it, it's going to be a very weak blow. If I hit farther than that, then I'm going to have a lot of warble and I'm going to lose some power. So it's going to be right about here is going to be the sweet spot. So another way to know the difference between if you're throwing a good snap versus if you're throwing a cut, adjust your distance to the pel and feel how hard you're hitting it. If you're hitting with the most power, maybe 3 inches from the tip, then you're throwing more of a snap. If you try to throw a blow and your power falls short there and you get a little bit closer and all of a sudden the blow's harder, then you're throwing more of a cut. Now, the next class of blow is a punch. You make this into one solid mass, hit low on the sword and punch straight out. Okay? These punches aren't vertical. It's very rare to have somebody throw a vertical punch because there's just no target there. Typically speaking, a punch is going to be to the eye slot. Typically speaking, most punches are close range blows thrown low on the sword, punching at your opponent's face. Now I have a very slow moving mass. It's only moving as fast as I can move my arm forward. But it's a larger mass because I'm keeping my wrist tight and I'm linking it to my body. So my arm and shoulder and body is contributing to the overall mass at the point of impact. I'm relying on that mass to generate power more so than the speed. As a result of that, if I hit someone in the leg or body in an armored position, it's mostly going to feel like a push. The person may not even call it. They may not seem very hard. But I can hit them in the head with that exact same shot, okay, which they might call light to the leg or light to the body, and they'll go, oh God, that was so hard. That was such a hard shot. Even though it's really not that hard a shot, I wouldn't be able to penetrate any metal with it because it's moving too slow. But we call head blows based on acceleration of the head. And so with a punch, I can accelerate your helmet, which moves your head, which makes it feel like a good blow because your head can't feel the blow hitting you. It only feels the acceleration. Conversely, a snap, which might seem decent to the head, can hit a piece of armored leg, and that same snap will feel much harder to the leg than it will to the head. Go in the other direction, which we call a torque, which I think is the next advancement over a snap. The easiest way to teach a torque, I think, is to try and throw a molinet. This way to learn the molinet, start out in a tent guard, pull the hand down and let the tip go forward. And what's going to happen is my sword is actually rotating around a center of mass, which is actually slightly above my hand, which is why we call it a torque. It's rotating around. Because of that, because my hand is moving in the opposite direction of the sword tip, it's an extremely low amount of mass contributing to the force at the end. But you make up for that with a great deal of speed. When it's done, and once again, it requires timing and coordination of the muscles, just like the snap does, perhaps even more so. And when it's done right, it looks like this. Okay? With the torque, because you have such a small amount of mass, and because you're moving very quickly, you're treating this end kind of like a bullet. So now, even rather than 3 inches from the tip, the hardest part to hit with is actually going to be right at the tip. As long as it's not too spoogey, it's going to be about 1 inch away from the tip. The closer you get to that, the harder the shot's going to hit. That's actually what we call a broken mystic molinet, or a flat snap, or a flat torque. Okay? The basic molinet is a vertical shot, but the mechanic is the same. If you notice, I've got a rotation motion here. My hand isn't pulling down, it's not really punching forward, it's really just rotating. And when I do the broken wristed molinet, watch my elbow. The elbow goes through a great deal of motion, but the hand and the wrist don't. So I'm contributing a lot of force without moving very much offline. That has a number of tactical advantages to it. The last class of blow I'm going to talk about is a thrust. All I'm going to say about a thrust right now is that a thrust that is only a thrust is no good. You don't want to line up a thrust and poke somebody. That's never the way to go in SCA fighting. You want to start another blow and then thrust at the end. Start another blow and then thrust at the end. Start another blow and then thrust at the end. You never want to get in line and then thrust. Wraps fall into 2 categories, and I'll save that for the next tape.